Good morning. Today we are with Angela Bischoff here in Toronto, Ontario, and we are talking with her about her work on clean air and her campaigns that she is doing in the area, and also what are her perspectives in the context of Canada and also worldwide. So, can you please tell us what's the name of your organization and what are the main issues that you are working on?
Great. So I work with the Ontario Clean Air Alliance. We're a small NGO that was formed in 1997 to call for the coal phase out of this province. At the time, we got a quarter of our electricity from coal. It was very dirty. We had 50 smog days every summer. And environmentalists came together and just said, no more coal. And they were smart and strategic, and they were super politically savvy, and they got the government of the day to actually do it, phase out coal. And by 2014, all our coal plants were shut down. And really, that was the largest climate achievement of the time, and the first jurisdiction that phased out coal for environmental and health reasons in the world. And then the government, unfortunately, started turning toward, well, they were also doing some renewables at the time. They were phasing out gas at the time. They were also building nuclear plants. And then a new government, conservative government, was elected in 2018, and they canceled all the renewables programs, started ramping up gas, building new nuclear plants. And that's when we really turned our attention to focusing exclusively on moving Ontario to 100% renewable electricity grid, and defeating the government's plans of building new nuclear and gas plants. And that's where I am today, advocating for a renewable future. I mean, the world is going renewable. Despite what Donald Trump is trying to do, or Doug Ford here in Ontario trying to do by doing the bidding for large fossil fuel and nuclear companies, the world is actually moving to a renewable future. One stat to give you a sense, last year alone, 92.5% of all new electricity that came onto the grid around the world was from wind and solar, and mostly solar. And it's because they're very reliable and the lowest cost options to meet our electricity needs. Nobody's building nuclear and fossil fuels unless they are representing those corporate interests. Maybe they already have a nuclear industry like in Ontario, so we're just sort of keeping them alive, keeping those unions alive, keeping that industry alive. We also in Canada have uranium, so we're keeping a uranium industry afloat. But most of the world is really turning to a renewable future. Even many states in the United States are going renewable, Texas especially, full steam ahead on wind and solar. So we can't really hold back the renewables revolution, but right-wing governments like Trump and Ontario and China and Russia, they're drilling down to build more nuclear stations and more oil and gas. That's how they think. Well, actually, China is building way more solar and wind than the whole rest of the planet. They are also building nuclear stations. But, we are winning the battle around the world. We just have to stop this nuclear, supposed what they are branding renaissance here in Ontario. And in the United States, they're really pushing hard for it. And the new terminology is SMRs, or small modular nuclear reactors, and they haven't even been built. They're just kind of a fantasy technology. There are two SMRs in China and two in Russia. They're experimenting. They're super high cost, and all the SMRs that are being proposed for North America, or around the world for that matter, all require enriched uranium fuel, which we don't produce in Canada. They do produce it in the United States. They produce it in Russia, a couple of other countries. Why are we making ourselves more dependent on American technology? Even the SMR technology that we're buying to bring up here is American technology. Even the gas that we use 70% of the gas we use comes from the United States. Why are we locking ourselves into the highest cost, dirtiest, most risky options, fossil fuels and nuclear power, when we could be producing clean, renewable power right here in Ontario? Lake Ontario, Ontario is surrounded by several Great Lakes. We could put wind turbines out on the Great Lakes. You wouldn't even see them 10 kilometers offshore and power all of our province just with that. There's so many options. We could meet half our electricity needs in the city of Toronto just by putting solar panels on the existing buildings and in parking lots. I mean, when they say that we can't meet our needs with renewables, it's just hogwash. It's just myths perpetuated by the fossil fuel industry and the nuclear industry in Ontario, which really has a hold on this province. The head of our nuclear regulatory agency, as soon as he left, he's now working for one of the SMR companies. They all do it. The head of the nuclear regulatory agency today used to work for the nuclear industry. She went from the nuclear industry to the head of the regulatory agency. And the last one that left went to work for industry. So there should be regulations. There should be legislation.
Is it possible to push for that kind of...
I think that's a good advocacy campaign. We're not working on that. We're focusing on Ontario and changing public opinion, raising awareness, and pushing government to do the correct policy decisions. But yes, a campaign like what you describe is really, really necessary.
Tell me, what are your challenges these days?
Our challenges is that the nuclear industry has so much money. It's publicly owned. It's public funds. We own it's public. The Ontario Power Generation that owns all the nuclear plants, all the nuclear reactors in the province. They're owned by the citizens of Ontario, and they have billions of dollars. And they spend so much on propaganda. They have hundreds of staff just propagandizing. And anywhere you go, to any baseball game or any transit shelter, you see advertising that nuclear power is clean and necessary. And the NGO community, or the anti-nuclear community, is so small. Most organizations won't even take on nuclear, because the nuclear industry has branded itself as a clean energy option. And there's probably on every board of directors of every environmental group and every funding organization, there's going to be someone there that's pro-nuclear. And so, for example, when we took on nukes initially back in 2014, we lost all our foundation funding. And they didn't come back until then we turned our attention to gas. That was, considered a legitimate climate campaign, and now they fund our work. But they fund our climate work for gas, to phase out gas. They don't fund our anti-nuclear work. Although, they know we're doing it, and that's how we get around it. But most environmental groups won't take on nuclear power because it's considered controversial. And because there's such a widespread propaganda push that the public has been persuaded, much of the public has been persuaded that nuclear is a climate option. However, we have done polling. Just in May, we did a huge poll of 1,200 Ontarians. We said, do you support us bringing in GE Hitachi or US-based nuclear technology, or would you prefer wind and solar made in Canada? And 80% plus said we want wind and solar made in Canada, not US nuclear technology. So,
who do the propaganda, the own government or entities that are beneficiaries from the funding that the government or that provide services to the government?
Yeah,
it's
mostly government that's doing it.
Yes.
Yeah, the government just has
the
subcontractors. And maybe the subcontractors as well. So the nuclear industry so we have the Ontario power generation that owns all the nuclear stations. We're buying reactors from the States now, SMRs. So that company is advertising, I'm sure. And, there's lots of spin-off industries. People who are making cement, and there's lots of spin-offs that are going to benefit from these
Yes, yes.
multi-billion-dollar contracts. So
Have
maybe
you
they're advertising
have you
as well.
done like a mapping of where that money from the government goes in contracts?
I haven't seen that.
Okay.
I haven't seen that
There
mapping.
must exist. It must be like a public domain, I guess.
Someone should do that research. I haven't seen it.
Well, it's a lot of work to be done,
Yeah.
And the problem is
Yeah.
that they hire the smartest people from the most expensive universities with the best wages, and we have to fight against these people,
Yeah.
and we don't have the
With
resources.
volunteers.
Yeah,
We ask volunteers to distribute our literature and to share our posts on social media. I mean, there's 4 of us for this
Yes,
organization, and there's a few other organizations that have a staff person that works on nuclear stuff. But basically in Ontario, it's us.
But it's so important. Also, it's very important to know the statistics. You say that when they create these laws to clean the air of Ontario, what was the percentage of pollution that went down?
Well, when we phased out coal, we now get 0 smog days in the summer.
Okay.
So from 2000, when we got a quarter of our
Unless there is a
electricity-
fire.
Yeah,
That
but
would be nothing related to.
right.
Yes, yes.
Exactly. But I've never. Yeah, you're right. There's probably been a few smog days from fires where you wake up in the morning and the newscaster on the radio says, "Don't go outside today because there's fire smoke." That happens occasionally, a few times.
And
in
it's
the summer.
different than the previous pollution.
Right.
That was more based on what?
That was smog. That was particulate matter in the air, and
Coming from where?
from the coal plants.
From the coal plants.
We had the largest coal, so we had 5 coal plants at the turn of the century. We had the largest coal plant in the world just on the end of Lake Ontario, and the smog or the smoke from the smokestacks would come right over the lake into Toronto. And so we had really bad smog in Toronto. So each of those 5 coal plants got shut down over a period, one after the other, over 10 years. And we're slowly being replaced with wind, solar, water power.
Okay. It reminds me the crisis of 1800s in England.
Yeah.
When so many people died. It happened in Japan also in 1900s, right? It's crazy.
Wow.
So it's interesting.
What was that caused from coal?
Yes,
in Chiapas?
yes. In Japan.
In Japan.
Japan.
Oh.
And also there was a crisis in England. A lot of
Yeah,
people.
I know that one. Yeah.
And also in England, these trains were open. They didn't have roofs, so all the
Right.
contamination came inside and contaminated the
Right.
people.
Plus, they were cooking with coal in their apartment,
Yes.
in their houses.
So it's so
Also,
highly
yeah.
polluted. So going back into the local politics, it's different the support or how a state or province wide lawmakers listen to you than lawmakers.
The city politicians, municipalities are much more progressive, and they pay attention to us. But the provincial government right now, they have a majority, so they can do whatever they want. The NDP, they're sort of left-leaning union party, they are sort of split on nuclear. The Green Party, there's a lot of pro-nuclear people in the Green Party as well. But they don't realize that nuclear and gas are connected. Like in Ontario, gas is ramping up from 4% in 2018 to 25% in 2030 while they build out these new nuclear stations. So when someone says, "Oh, I'm pro-nuclear, but I'm anti-gas," they don't realize that, well, actually you can't, they go together. Because if we were to do nuclear and renewables and build out a bunch of renewables, we'd realize there's no reason to build out nuclear. We don't need nuclear because wind and solar power are a fraction of the cost, and they're cleaner, and they don't leave a radioactive legacy for future generations to deal with for 1 million years. That's the industry, what they say. Their waste has to be isolated from the environment for 1 million years. And of course, that's going to be on indigenous land.
Yes. Another question that I have, what is the production of solar panels, for example, in this province? Do you think that
None.
no?
No, we had a solar industry in this province. I don't know if they were actually producing solar panels. I think they were. Yeah, it was Samsung in Eastern Ontario. I think it was Samsung. Anyways, the previous Liberal government, they incentivized companies, solar and wind companies, to move to our province and build the supply chain in the province. And they paid them high rates to establish themselves in the province. Today, Ontario has more wind and solar power than any other province because the previous Liberal government incentivized companies, paid them really good rates. And the whole idea was every year the rates would come down so that they would be competitive. But the right wing in this province jumped on the fact that we were paying renewable companies more to establish themselves here, and it raised our electricity rates. Then the rates came down, and now our electricity rates are rising because of nuclear and gas. Those are our most expensive options. But people still, the myth is still out there that wind and solar are really expensive, but they're not. So people are confused. So we have a cost chart on our website that shows new nuclear and gas are our most expensive options, and new wind and solar are a fraction of the cost, like between 2 and 8 times less expensive. But the myth is still out there that wind and solar are expensive because 2 decades or a decade ago, when we were buying wind and solar, we had to pay more to bring them into the country or into the province and the country. And then when the new government, the Conservative government, I call him Trump of the North, Doug Ford, when he was elected in 2018, he canceled 758 renewable energy projects that were in progress. He even ripped turbines out of the ground and paid $200 million of tax dollars to those companies for ripping their turbines out because they were taken to court. And then he started ramping up nuclear and gas. So it just makes, it's totally irrational, and it only makes sense if you realize that this Conservative government is representing the gas industry, the uranium industry, and the nuclear industry of this province. That's who he represents. He doesn't represent the environment or taxpayers or, future generations that are going to have to manage the waste.
And what would be the reaction of people who vote him? Do you think that is the public what the voters want? What this guy is doing? Or what do you think?
Well, he's been elected 3 times. He's had a majority government 3 times, despite what he's been doing. And there's 2 reasons for that. One, people are sucked in. They like his personality. It's sort of like people like Trump. It's the same. He's a big, man of the people, sort of a dum. But also, we have a first past the post electoral system. So Doug Ford, half the people don't bother to vote because they're disenfranchised. They think that their vote doesn't matter, so they don't bother to vote, half the people. And of those, the sort of more progressive people split their vote between the Liberals, NDP, and Green parties. And so Doug Ford gets all the right-wingers, so he gets elected a majority government where he can do whatever he wants with only 20% of the eligible vote. So 20%. Yeah, there's probably 20% of the population that doesn't believe in climate change. And they just keep electing Doug Ford. But most of us do. And we're not being properly represented by this government. And that's why we got to kick his ass out of government.
Yes, and if we talk about the winters, I hear in Ottawa that there is no as much snow in the past. In Quebec, also, I hear someone told me that in the past there was a lot of snow, and now there is less snow. What are the how do you see through the years how it has been changing the climate here?
Well, I moved to Toronto in 99, so that was 25, 26 years ago. And I've been riding my bike every year. And those first 5 years, we got so much snow. I would ride through like huge mounds of snow. I'm from Edmonton, Western Canada, where we get lots of snow. So I was really strong and used to riding in the snow. And we would put spikes on our studs on our bike tires and tons of snow. Now we get no snow. There's like this past winter, there was maybe a week that I didn't ride my bike because of snow. When it's super snowy, I don't bother. But back in, 25 years ago, we got tons of snow. So that's just a little example, a little window of the climate changing. And people, people in the province know that. They're aware of it. They don't maybe deny climate change, but they deny that, that 20% of the population, I guess. The debate is that it's not caused by fossil fuels or it's not caused by human actions, or that it's just a blip. I don't know. I can't speak for them, but yeah,
Yes,
climate's changing. People are
that is in
aware,
the
and
winter.
also
What
forest
and
fires.
the summer is what I was going to ask
Yeah,
about the summer. How what is the statistic? Is increasing how much percent every year?
the forest fires.
Yes, yes.
That, you know what? I'm not up on that, but I think like we had our worst wildfire season was it 2 years ago, and now like not last summer but the summer before, and now this summer is setting up to be, if not as bad, almost as bad. So we're seeing huge tracts of our fires, contributing to the global rise in temperature. The boreal forest is burning, and the last couple of years we've seen a huge escalation. Right now, just this past week, we had really bad smoggy skies in Toronto from forest fires coming from, Manitoba. There's many communities that have been evacuated in Manitoba. I think even a couple in Ontario, Saskatchewan, lots of evacuations. Yeah, it's a bad wildfire season this year.
So, how do you see the future? What are you have new strategies, new allies? What are your plans for the future? What do you think that is the answer to these challenges? And
I think that we're always building and growing as a movement. Seniors are getting involved, children are getting involved. The movement is growing, and we need a shift in our electoral process. That would make a really, really big difference. All of Europe and all industrial nations now use some form of proportional representation, with very few exceptions, England being one. But Canada needs electoral reform. And we need a change in government. We need a groundswell of awareness of people standing up, using the courts, challenging government policy, and that's what my role is raising enough public awareness to challenge government policy, to make them worried that they're not going to get reelected if they do certain things.
do you recommend any literature for people that are interested in learning more, being more aware, and getting involved?
Yeah, there's a couple of groups that are really pushing for 100% renewable energy future, and I should just add, relevant to that last question, the renewables revolution really is happening. It's happening. It's industry-led, because all private dollars are going into renewables. No private dollars are going into nuclear power. They're also going into fossil fuels, but really the thrust now for industry, where they're going to make lots of money, is in wind and solar power. And so that's happening regardless of what Doug Ford does. That's why the fossil fuel industry is really digging in their heels, because they see the writing on the wall. They've peaked. The decline of the fossil age is happening now, and they're desperate and they're holding on, and they're trying to get these big projects like pipelines and nuclear stations built, because they know in 10 years, forget it, none of that's going to be built, because the renewables revolution is just taking over. So there's a few groups that I really recommend for people who are keen on these topics. One is the Rocky Mountain Institute. They're based in Colorado, and they're doing the most cutting edge research on batteries, on mining, on energy conservation and efficiency. Anything they do is like, thank you, Rocky Mountain Institute, rmi.org. And then Mark Jacobson in the United States, he at Stanford, he's a professor at Stanford. He's started a few groups. I think one is called 100% renewable. Is that, or the renewables, the solution? I'm sorry. Mark Jacobson. He's doing the best work on understanding how countries, how states, how provinces can go 100% renewable. Whether, they're modeling whether it's wind or solar or water, what are the best resources for their countries. The potential is so great. It's happening. So those are two really good ones. There's in terms of nuclear issues, the best resource is online. It's a guy in France, Michael Schneider, who runs this site and does the research for it. It's called the World Nuclear Industry Status Report. And he does the research, what countries are building, the decline of the industry, how much it's costing, which ones are shutting down. Anything you want to know, check out Michael Schneider's work. And then, of course, our organization, the Clean Air Alliance, .org, if you're in the Toronto, or if you're in the Canadian zone, or Ontario in particular, we're really the organization that's focusing on energy policy, but we really do focus on Ontario. There are a few other national groups, but I think you're more of an international audience, so that's why I've given you some other resources.
Well, thank you so much for everything, and I hope some people get in touch with you or check it out what you are doing.
Thank you, Miguel, for your time.
Thank you.